Hey guys, welcome to the 911Strong podcast. On today's special 9/11 episode, we're going to talk about the heroics on that fateful day 18 years ago. We're also going to discuss suicide prevention, with this month being National Suicide Awareness Month, and about a prominent Southern California pastor who was an advocate for suicide awareness who actually committed suicide himself. We got this and a lot more coming up on the 911Strong podcast.
Station to all units.
Prepare to copy.
You're listening to the 911Strong podcast.
Don't act like I never told you.
With Aram and Kristen, bringing you stimulating discussion.
No, I like the sound of that.
An entertaining conversation.
And now, here's Kristen and Aram.
And we're back. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We know that you have your choice of podcasts and radio stations you can listen to, and we certainly appreciate the fact that you're bringing us into your homes, your offices, and your drives. And we certainly appreciate the ratings boost. This morning, we woke up to good news that we're ranked number 334 in the nation.
That's awesome.
Yeah, without your help, we couldn't be there. So, but yeah, thanks for your continued support. With that said, we got an amazing show packed for you today. Today is 9/11, and we have a lot of memories. Kristen and I were both working in our fields when 9/11Strong happened. When 9/11 happened, the attacks happened, I was working as a sheriff's deputy, and you were as a dispatcher.
Yes.
And I'd imagine that day was crazy. But we're going to jump into that. Before we jump into that, we've got some news that we want to talk about, right?
We do. We have a few things that we want to talk about. News-wise, since it is National Awareness for Suicide, we want to talk about a pastor who is up and coming, younger, and was an advocate for suicide. And then, unfortunately, things came over him, and he committed suicide and left behind a beautiful family. So we're going to discuss that. And then also, like we had mentioned, we want to talk about the heroics that happened on this day 18 years ago.
Yeah. So before we jump into the heroics on 9/11, because there are some really good stories. The title of this episode is 9/11. Did we forget? Because the phrase that we hear is never forget.
Yeah.
I'm going to argue that we might have forgotten some of the things, and we're going to bring up some stories that I think you'll remember when I bring them up, but we don't constantly think about.
Yeah.
But before we get there, a mega church pastor from Harvest Church in Riverside, where a very popular pastor, Greg Laurie, founded, was shocked this Monday when Jared Wilson, who's a very popular associate pastor there, committed suicide. He suffers from depression himself and was an advocate for suicide awareness. As a matter of fact, on Monday, he put out a post talking about suicide awareness. I'm going to read it for you right now. It says, "Loving Jesus doesn't always cure suicidal thoughts. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure depression. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure PTSD. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure anxiety. But that doesn't mean Jesus doesn't offer us companionship and comfort. He always does that." That was the day he committed suicide.
Gosh.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
And I showed you the family photos. I mean, it was a beautiful family.
Beautiful family.
He was outrageously popular at the church, and he published 4 books that were bestsellers. But he had some demons. He suffered from depression.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're aware of some personal incidents of depression too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We've had, unfortunately, I haven't had anyone really close to me commit suicide, but unfortunately now my daughter has had 2, are actually going to a funeral this weekend for a teenager that, unfortunately possibly went that route. So it's sad to see how many more suicides there are. Maybe it's just because of social media it's coming out more often, but I mean, in one day alone, I think I dealt with 5 suicide calls too.
Right.
It's just it feels like more and more frequent and more familiar to everybody. It's touched, I think, everybody that we know in one way, shape, or form.
And we've had discussions about this before where we had theories of why we think it's on the increase. Maybe it's just the awareness of it because of social media.
Yeah.
Or do you think maybe it's because we've started pulling God away from our lives? Some of you may know, my dad committed suicide, and my dad didn't have God in his heart. So he legitimately believed, as a matter of fact, on his suicide note, he said that this was the pinnacle of his life and that there was nothing else to look forward to. And as Christians, we believe that there's a life after this. This life is just temporary, and that what's waiting for us after this life is much better than what we have.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't have that in his heart, and so he felt the need to end his life.
Yeah.
Which is different than what Jared Wilson, the pastor from Harvest Church, went through. He obviously had God in his heart, but he also was suffering from mental illness as well.
Yeah.
So I do think it's a combination of an increase in mental illness and the absence of Christ. But maybe suicide awareness comes from, the pressures of suicide comes from social media as well.
Yeah.
We have such an expectation of what perfect relationships are supposed to look like, what perfect people are supposed to look like. Do you think it adds pressure to them?
I think so. I can speak from the kids section of it, I guess, because I've, talked with my daughter about all this stuff. And again, she's also being in high school. There's been a few kids that have committed suicide as well. And I think they're so, we as adults are bad with comparison, but we also knew what it was like before social media.
Sure.
So with these kids, I think that's all they see is the highlight reel. And now enter in bullying, and they get that on the side, or they get, fake sites that are just, I think one of them was like kill X, Y, and Z, and just hate that comes through with it. And, so they're getting it from all ends at school and then on social media. And I think they're just in so much pain, and they're not really taught how to ask for help, or that there is more to life outside of this, that they don't see an end game, I guess. And
I think that's what the saddest part is when it comes to kids, is that the fact that they feel like there's no hope left and no choice but to end their life. Yeah. It's so sad. And we look at some of these instances as to why. You mentioned bullying. There's countless stories of teens that killed themselves because of bullying from chat rooms or from social media. Yeah. Well, it's easy for us as mature adults to say, just ignore it. Yeah. That's not the reality when it comes to kids.
Right, because that's all they know. Right. They're on social media all the time, even doing everything's technology with them, even doing homework. They do homework with other kids now via FaceTime or whatever, So they're always on it. They always see it. And, I'm sure they can't even handle damage control, because by then everybody in the school's seeing whatever else, if it's public,
Do you think they're being sensitive to some of the things that are being said?
I think so. I think some of it is just, I don't know if they're being raised to live in a bubble and they're not being taught to have a thick skin, but they need to be able to stand on their 2 feet too, and I try to express that to my daughters. You need to be strong about things. People are always going to say hurtful things. There's always going to be people who don't like you. That's the same as being an adult. We deal with that all our lives. So you need to start learning about it now. These kids in high school, they're only in your life for 4 years. Sure. That's it. And you're not going to see them again, more than likely. That's
the difficult thing about suicide and depression and mental illness, right? Because you mentioned having a thick skin. But you would think that if it was that easy just to have a thick skin and not be sensitive, we could push that stuff away. But on our pre-show, we talked about the amount of suicides that affected the NYPD. Yeah. And you would think NYPD officers, they're some of the toughest officers in the nation, let alone being officers who have to have thick skins. Yeah. But these guys are the toughest of the toughest, right? They work in tough cities. New York is known as that blue-collar working environment. Yet in the month of August, they were rocked by 9 suicides in a relatively short amount of time.
It was horrible. I just felt so horrible.
So what do you think, in addition, it's got to be a word combination, right? Nobody's been able to peg it. Do you think it's mental illness? Do you think it's outside pressures?
I think it's outside and inner pressure. Granted, clearly I don't know what's going on within their department, but I know that there's politics within departments, and then there's the politics with their mayor. And I don't know how much support they're getting within their own department. Yeah. You can put up those flyers saying oh, here's a number, call it. Or, you guys, if you need help, go ask somebody. But they need to be more active, I think, about that. And again, I don't know if they're really doing that or not. But I know some other departments have a peer support group that can reach out to their own peers. If you've never dealt with, I don't know, a shooting, you can't have some rookie cop talk to another cop who's been in a shooting. You need somebody who's had that mutual involvement to say hey, I went through it and I came out of it. But they just need somebody to talk to. Maybe they don't have that there. Maybe it's more no, we're not discussing that. You need to cut it off And you need to, like I said, have a thick skin and just go through it.
Yeah.
Like suck it up, which is unfortunate because you need to get that stuff off your chest.
I think you're right. For someone that hasn't gone through it, it's easy to look on the outside and say, have a thick skin, suck it up, right?
Yeah.
But people that have gone through life experiences and similar experiences, they can offer empathy. And so when I tell people that are going through something that I went through with my dad, I can tell them I completely understand where you're coming from, and it carries some weight.
Right,
There's
exactly.
What's the credibility behind that? Whereas a lot of people want to offer, they want to be helpful, and they'll say, I know what you're going through, but in the receiving end's minds, they're like, no, you don't.
Yeah,
So I think it's important to have people that, I hate to use the word survivor, but people that have gone through that be advocates, and that's why it's important that we have platforms such as our podcast and our individual social media accounts. To be able to talk about it and be public about it, because we don't do anybody else any good holding this information back.
Right.
If we can affect just one person or maybe a segment of people, letting them know that and be transparent, letting them know that we've done it,
right.
and they see our vulnerability, that they might be able to be vulnerable themselves and take the next step and make a phone call. Because sometimes that's all it takes. Yeah.
There's always somebody that they can talk to. It's just making that first step. There's no shame in asking for help. It's just venting. And sometimes venting outside your circle is a good thing, and you don't always have to go through your insurance company. You don't have to go through your workers' comp. You don't have to go through whoever they mandate to be your counselor. You don't have to do that. You can go out on your own, sometimes pay through your own pocket, but that's worth it if it's for your mental health, and get through it that way.
Right. Being mentally tough, that's a good segue into our next subject. So today on 9/11, 18 years ago today, the world was just shocked. I mean, we were rocked. A lot of people were just waking up watching the news as to what happened. I remember exactly where I was. Do you?
Oh yeah, I do.
What was the setting that you had?
I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I was in Las Vegas, and woke up like any other morning, went down to have some breakfast, and then I heard some guys kind of talking off to the right of me about how our country is under attack and it's just crazy, and that they were starting to shut down some of the Vegas towers. Wow. So I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I'm like, I better get home. So I start going home, and I just turned on the radio. I didn't even have to pick a certain radio. And they talked about the two towers. And as I was heading home, I heard about the Pentagon being hit. Right. And then, the days after was just crazy. Obviously, when I got home, I actually saw everything on the news, and it was just heartbreaking. It was surreal just to watch that, know, and it was pretty traumatic just to watch. And then just seeing how quiet the air was after, no commercial planes, just fighter planes flying over. And then in the days after, seeing the camaraderie about just how proud we are to be Americans was amazing. But at the same time, on the flip side of it, being in dispatch, anyone that wasn't deemed American, people were calling on them left and right. Yeah. It was crazy.
We had some ugly things happen.
We did. Yeah, we did. And so that part of it was really unfortunate, but the camaraderie was really great. And yeah, I can remember all of it. How about you?
I was working. I was in my second year as a deputy sheriff in Los Angeles. My station was in Los Angeles, and right in downtown off of Vignes and Boucher Street. It's a very famous area where the Twin Towers, our own Twin Towers, which is a jail housing facility, and across the street is Men's Central Jail, is made infamous by a lot of people, that probably during my time, O.J. Simpson. That's where he stayed. And in Los Angeles, when you join the sheriff's department, you've got to work custody for a couple of years, and that's where I was assigned. I was assigned to an office with several other deputies. I was chomping on a breakfast burrito that I got from the food truck, that food truck's still out there, by the way. Legendary burritos. You said when you saw the towers being hit, you were in dismay. Well, we didn't know what was going on because we actually saw it live. Whatever program we were watching on the tube TV, it was breaking news, and we saw the smoke erupt from the first tower, and they said that an airplane hit it. We didn't know that if it was an accident or what. And then it panned over to the second tower because the airplane was approaching. We're like,
Right.
no, this can't be.
Yeah.
And we're like, did someone jam the towers? Is there something wrong with the satellite system? We
Yeah.
had no idea that it was
Yeah.
even a terrorist attack. And it wasn't even until like 3 minutes after the second tower hit that they're getting reports that it maybe have been a terror attack.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then a minute after that, the teletypes came through, and we were put on tactical alert at the facility,
Right.
our whole department actually. So I know some units deployed out to the field, other units deployed remains in the facility. But it was a scary time because I was new. You know?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what's next. What's going to happen? Are we the next target?
Yeah.
They were talking about Twin Towers, and I worked directly across the street from LA's version of the Twin Towers.
Right.
And our downtown skyline surrounds our facility. So we didn't know what to do. We didn't have social media back then.
Right.
I didn't even have a smartphone back then. I had a flip phone.
Right.
So there was no,
Yeah.
with the 1G technology or whatever it was back then, the cell phones were jammed anyway.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a crazy time. But a common hashtag that you see when you go, like today, if you go on social media, everything's never forget.
Right.
Hashtag never forget.
Yeah.
But I would argue that we did forget a lot of the heroics that occurred.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the planes that hit the towers. There's two. And
Right.
the third plane that hit the Pentagon.
Pentagon.
Do you remember the fourth plane?
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know where that plane was bound?
I want to say it was for LA.
It was.
Yeah.
It was bound for Los Angeles. So we still don't know
Yeah.
where the target was. But the heroics that occurred in there, a lot of people forgot. There was 40-something passengers in there. They all perished. Because of phones and stuff like that, people were on flights. People were able. That's when some of the first in-cabin phones people were able to use them.
Right.
And you were able to use cell phones in the
Yeah.
planes, even though they told you not to.
Right.
So people got word that these
Yeah, the
attacks happened.
confirmation.
Right. And there's some stories here. So United Flight 93 was the plane in question. It was 40 minutes after they left Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. But the plane had been delayed and taken off, and the passengers on the ground had time to talk, while they were waiting for them to take off, had time to learn of the events via cell phone and airphone calls to the ground.
Yeah.
So they had no idea that they had hijackers in there or whatnot. But, excuse me, eventually they learned that the attackers on the plane were trying. They learned that the attacks happened. They were panicking because it was delayed taxiing. So they made a move once they left in the air. Then they took fire extinguishers and tried to hit the cabin. So one of the passengers, his name was Thomas Burnett Jr. He was made famous all over the internet because I still don't know how it was recorded. Maybe they got it from the black box, but he's the one that says, hey, I know we're all going to die. There's 3 of us who are going to do something about it. I love you, honey. And another passenger behind him was heard saying, are you guys ready? Let's roll. And that just reading that gives me the chills. Me
just
too.
Hearing it.
And but the heroics, the
God
bravery.
bless them.
These guys were average citizens who were Americans.
Yeah.
Right? They knew that they were going to die. They were going to die for something greater because they had no idea where this plane was going to attack. But it was going to be up to these individuals to stop that from happening.
Yeah.
We don't hear stories of that anymore. We had,
Yeah.
I mean, for all the bumbling President George Bush did, they portray him as an idiot, really.
Yeah.
But he really stepped up and brought this country together after it happened.
He did.
We were sucker punched.
did.
We were sucker punched that day, but in the following days, we really took it to the people responsible, Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
And it was just it brought the country together. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes an event like that to bring the country together. But that's only 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And we've gotten so far away from that.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of ugly things that happened. You're right. People were unjustifiably profiled because they wore turbans.
Right.
I had a friend that was Sikh.
Yeah.
And they're not Muslim, but they wear turbans. And people
Right.
just were like,
Yeah.
hey, you're a terrorist.
Yeah, they call on anybody just walking down the street. It was really sad.
I'm sure you got a lot of that,
Oh,
right?
we got dozens of phone calls for that. It was so sad.
Yeah, and in
they
our
weren't doing anything.
Yeah, and
I get it. They were scared because of what had just happened, and they're trying to do the right thing. I get that half of it, but then I felt bad for the other, for the parties that are being picked on, basically, for just, their race or their beliefs.
and that's exactly that. They were being picked on. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we move forward 18 years and so much has changed in this country.
Yeah, they're burning flags. Can you imagine if they did that on today, 18 years ago?
Right.
Oh, man.
I'm sure, and it may be happening. I think I do remember on one of the 9/11 anniversaries, there was a protest talking about that this was an inside job, and you still hear conspiracy theories and stuff like that. I made a post last night on my 911Strong page, and sure enough, someone puts a link that it was a conspiracy, and
just ridiculous. There's always got to be one.
Yeah, there were several. I mean, my Facebook page especially, and that one I tend not to respond on negative things because I know my loyal followers
will
do a
go
great
at it
job,
for
and
you.
they did. They responded, and then I'll let it go for a while before I ban them from the page, just because it's entertainment. But that's just one of the stories. Even on that same flight, there was a flight attendant on that flight who called her husband and said that she knew that they were going to die. I love you. Yeah. She snuck down in a storage compartment and got 4 decanters or coffee decanters and filled them with extremely hot water because she was going to
dump it on them.
But what eventually happened was the terrorists were able to get fire extinguishers and they engulfed the cabin. Obviously, the pilots were suffocating in there. Yeah. They were disoriented, and the plane actually flipped upside down, and that's when it crashed into the field. But who knows? I mean, I feel completely horrible for those people that went down, but at the same time, it's such a blessing that they took control and took over and fought for everyone and against those terrorists. And I mean, they were in an open field. What's the chances it was in an open field and not in another town, whether it was planned or not, Yeah, if I was a passenger, I wouldn't be able to tell you where we're going to land. I don't think I think they just thought that they needed to stop what was happening. Yeah.
But I mean, like, what a blessing that they landed in a field and not into somebody else's town or anything and took out even more people.
Yeah, I know you and I believe this, but things happen for a reason. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people died. And another thing that people don't talk about are the heroes from that day. The first responders, the firefighters, the police officers, the EMS personnel, and then the emergency room personnel in the local area hospitals that were being engulfed. And unfortunately, a lot of these first responders that went to the site were exposed to a chemical that emits from jet fuel being burned, and it's a unique cancer that was that manifested itself from that. And unfortunately, a lot of firefighters and police officers contracted this cancer, and they're dying from it. And one of the big, I forget his name, but one of the big advocates, a firefighter who was really pushing legislation to recognize that these officers needed to be taken care of, because a lot of insurances, their insurance at least, didn't cover this cancer, even though scientists and experts proved that this cancer was born from that jet fuel exposure on the day of this crash site. It's unfortunate that we're not taking care of our heroes. It's not like, we can allocate all these funds, millions and billions of dollars to other countries in need, yet we can't just take a small portion of that and help the people that committed themselves,
gave everything that day
to help the people in this country. So I think something needs to be changed there, and I hope legislation moves forward. And it unfortunately, it takes discussions like this to put it on the national stage, so that people do talk about it. But I'd like to say that I've never forgotten, but sometimes it sucks that on 9/11 that we sit to ponder about these things, and that unfortunately by 9/13 or 9/14 we've already moved on to the next big subject.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, I think we had made some valid points, good points about 9/11. And if you're listening today, this will air today on 9/11. And if you're listening just a few days later, just don't forget to remember those who gave their all, not just the first responders, but the brave Americans that made sacrifices that day, that told their loved ones just minutes before they were going to take action that they were going to die.
Yeah. Don't let it be for nothing. Yeah.
All right. So, hey, we had some announcements coming up, right?
We do. On the 28th of this month, so a few more days, we're going to be at Proforce in Brea, and we are going to be guests of the Squad Room with Garrett Tesla. So if you guys want, come on down. They're going to be giving giveaways. We'll have a few of our items to give away as well. So that'll be a good meeting with everyone. So don't miss it. We'll definitely be posting it on our Instagrams just to keep a reminder out there. And then also, since it is Suicide Awareness Month, if you're in the LA area, there's a walk going on the 15th of September, and it's for free, and it's just to bring suicide awareness and prevention. So I'll be doing that as well. And it's in Los Angeles, like I said, on the 15th.
Awesome.
From 7 a.m. to 12 in the afternoon.
And for these updates, if they want to get real-time updates, where can they follow you on social media?
Dispatcher Kristen.
I'm just going to make you a hat that has your
Maybe I should. Just be like, it's that girl, Kristen, the dispatcher. You want to
Oh, yeah.
But I'll also put it up on our podcast Instagram as well.
Yeah. And I don't have an announcement. I just have a huge thanks because our ratings are just shooting up like crazy. We've got a lot of friends that have podcasts, and they're experienced casters of pods, and they're like, your stats are insane. We don't know why you're, what stat module are you looking at? And we're using the same ones. We're using Chartable, we're using Libsyn, and these are stats that come from Apple and Apple Core Media. We shot over 1,100 downloads just this month alone, and we're only 11 days into the month. So that means we're averaging about 100 downloads a day, which for a brand new podcast is insane.
Yay!
Yeah, so thank you guys very
awesome.
much.
You guys are amazing.
Yeah, and on our social media, we keep getting tagged in posts from people that say that they've discovered our podcast and that they need to listen to us, and we appreciate that. And as much as sometimes we get overwhelmed on social media, but if you tag us on your post and it has something to do with our podcast, we'll gladly share it. So make sure you tag us. And it's as simple as sharing. So, and a lot of people were surprised that we were on YouTube as well. They didn't know. They thought our podcast was strictly audio.
Yeah.
So
if they want to stare at our mugs, they can go on YouTube.
Yeah, I think it adds to a certain dimension. When people listen on the radio, we don't have our photos on there. We have our logo on there. So people are curious to see what we look like. Yeah. And I actually had someone message me who doesn't follow us on social media. Okay. And they until later, they listened to the podcast, they followed us on social media and said, "You're Asian?" So I didn't ask what race he thought I was. But no, we love you guys, and we love the support that you've given us. So
yes, thank you guys.
With that, thank you for listening in again. We hope that our discussions are really engaging, that it stimulates your mind and stimulates discussion later. That's, after all, why we do this stuff. We want to stimulate discussion because if we're not talking about it, we hope that other people are, and we hope that those individuals are yourselves. So thanks again, guys. Thank you for helping us jump in the ratings. I'd like to say one day, thank you for making us number one. And we know that you have your choice of podcasts to listen to, and as always, we thank you for listening to ours. So with that, thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Truly appreciate it. Take care.
Adios. We need a catchphrase.